Tell us, how did you get involved in Microsoft or with Microsoft?
Great, thank you, Laurent. So I'm from a working class family background, born with mum and dad and two brothers, both older than me, so I was the youngest and only girl. When I was 10 years of age, my father passed away quite suddenly. He had a massive brain hemorrhage and died. He was only 42. So that kind of shifted life a lot for us. My mum had to go back out to work. From an education perspective, she'd left school when she was 13. She'd grown up in a family of 15 and she became the housekeeper when her mum passed away. So she didn't have an education and she was very keen for all of her children to be educated. So school was a non-negotiable. There was no plan to leave school. But when I got to leaving cert, I made a decision to not go on and go to college, but instead to do a secretarial course, build some secretarial skills, and then try and get a job, really with the purpose of helping my mum at home, bring some finance into the household. So I got a job in a very small family business that supplied catering equipment to restaurants and hotels. And I worked with them for about 4 years. They doing everything from setting up their accounting system to answering the phone to delivering spices on a Saturday to Superquinn to picking up their kids from school. So it was a jack of all trades, master of none, and just an experience. But in the mid-80s, they ran into financial difficulties like a lot of companies, and they couldn't afford to pay me. So I had to go looking for another job, and I saw an ad in the Evening Herald by Mary B. Cremen was the agency, and they were looking for an accounts clerk for a business in Sandyford. Didn't know who the business was. Sandyford was close to where I lived in Stillorgan, and I applied for the job, got the interview, and started working for this unknown company called Microsoft, and I was employee number 24. Wow. So it was a crazy journey.
And what year was that?
1986, February 86.
And Microsoft established itself in Ireland in 2000?
September 85. Yeah. So
so that's the 40 years anniversary.
This year, yeah, which is amazing. But as I say, I was in the finance department. There was only 24 employees. It was a manufacturing facility. So we had long production lines, we had warehousing, and we were manufacturing physical discs and floppy discs at the time, which is really going back, manuals, and consolidating those and shipping them out to all of the markets in Europe.
So how do you move from, I'm sure it didn't happen overnight, but still, that's quite an achievement from starting, what did you say, as an accountancy clerk or
yes.
in Microsoft in 1985 to becoming the managing director?
Yeah, it was a long journey. So I spent about 10 years in finance. I had a really great mentor in the very early days, in our finance manager, who encouraged me to go and get my qualifications. So I did go back to night school, got my accounting technician qualification first, and then went on and did my ACCA qualifications. So I spent 10 years in finance, and then Microsoft was consolidating a lot of activity, operational activity, back into Ireland from each of the countries in Europe. And I got involved in that project, and I really enjoyed operations. So I decided to move into the area of operations, building up different subscription models, doing customer care, doing channel management. So traveled all over Europe into Russia, Czech Republic, down as far as Cape Town, and really got to know how the business worked. So I spent 17 years then in operations, and I ran global teams based in Japan, Singapore, North Dakota. So got a real flavour for the cultures that Microsoft were dealing with and the different needs of those cultures. So that was kind of building my appetite for diversity even further than I had started at first. And then for the last 8 years that I spent in Microsoft, I was managing director for Microsoft Ireland, which was leading the site for all of the activities, engineering, data center, digital sales, operations, and sales to the island of Ireland.
Very good. And so obviously you must have seen, and actually overlooking like the evolution of Microsoft in Ireland, which maybe is symptomatic of like the evolution of Ireland Inc., if you want to call it this way, over the last 40 years. What can you describe to our audience what it was, what it became, so that we have a better understanding of where we are now?
Well, I think when Microsoft first invested in Ireland, it was really had a couple of reasons for doing it. One was obviously tax. Back in the day, 12.5% for manufacturing was really a critical decision maker. Second was talent, how the educated workforce that they could get in Ireland. Over time, that became the gateway to Europe and being able to attract talent into Ireland, but that was a further evolution. So I'd seen from when the commitment that Microsoft made in the early days was to have 100 people in this manufacturing facility. And it evolved from manufacturing to consolidating all of their operational activity from Europe, order to cash processes back into Ireland. We outsourced a lot of the activity offshore. Then we came into the internet and digitization, and that evolved. And now we're seeing the evolution of AI. So I've lived through and seen the company evolve, the capabilities and skills and the requirements that they had here in Ireland. And one of the big jobs for me and the leadership team was about how do we keep Ireland to being relevant? How do we ensure that and that's a big topic right now for FDI in Ireland and what the future might be.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I guess you've seen the evolution of the workforce as well, as you pointed out, and actually it mirrors what we have experienced here at Trinity Business School. We're celebrating our 100 years anniversary, so a bit more than Microsoft, yes. But in the last certainly a few decades, it's the same pattern where all graduates used to graduate with a good degree from Trinity, but systematically would emigrate because there was not enough jobs in Ireland, and then obviously from the mid-90s onwards stopped starting to emerge, and now it's almost like the reverse. We're actually attracting foreign students to study in Ireland and get job in Ireland as well.
Yeah.
You mentioned stakeholder engagement in your role, and what was your position in trying to make like Ireland still relevant, and like the fact that and putting Microsoft on the map of maybe the government and other stakeholders, like what were your involvement in that particular part of the job?
I think there's two sides to that. One is there's the local market stakeholder management. So my role was responsible for all of the communications and all of the lobbying with government on policy. So think about data centres and the need for electricity, working with government to really understand what are the upgrades to the grid, when is that going to happen, how can we ensure that we're building in line with the power that's going to be available. Sure. Similarly, on the communication side, trying to share our philosophy on green technology and ensuring that we're not just sucking all the power of the grid. We're actually using some of the solar charge panels that we have to give electricity to local schools, and community engagement, and doing all our social responsibility as well. So not making it look like big negative tech. What are the jobs that I had then to try and be the face of Microsoft of doing good, which is like Microsoft's vision is to empower everybody and every organization on the planet to achieve more. So we had to stay educating and communicating what that philosophy was. And working with the likes of IBEC, Dublin Chamber of Commerce, and all of the policy influencers in the market. And I sat in that capacity, I sat on a number of different boards in public sector over my 20 years in Microsoft. So whether it was the Pharmaceutical Society of Ireland, or whether it was the VHI or Children's Hospital or Solace for further education and training, and the apprenticeships, I was on the board when that was all evolving. So really seeing my role as being a voice for Microsoft in the market, contributing to the market, contributing to Microsoft and to Ireland Inc. And then the second set of stakeholders was obviously back in the US. So how did we ensure that little old Ireland was, when we were competing against all the other markets in Europe who wanted investment,
Sure.
how did we make sure that we were getting the right level of investment, or that people were thinking about Ireland as an alternative to offshoring or to centralising activity. And there was a number of reasons you would do that. We worked very closely with the IDA on why Ireland, and obviously the talent had a lot to do with that. Educated workforce, gateway to Europe, being able to attract skills and talent that was required. And that meant that I worked very closely with Trinity or with UCD or with other colleges to make sure that the skills were going to be relevant for the needs we had as a business. We also had to talk about the talent we currently had in the business. So if we had a lot of leadership and management capability that we were able to put onto new projects for Microsoft if they put those projects in Ireland. So we had built this reputation of really strong leadership and management, and we were willing to share and collaborate. So if a new business needed to start up, like digital sales, it started with an idea of having 100 or 200 digital sales people in Ireland. It ended up having over 1,000 people working in digital sales. But we took people from other parts of operations, of engineering, of our data centres, and put them into that digital sales team. The people who had the management capability, who understood how Ireland worked, that could build the right culture for the organisation. So that differentiated us against other markets across Europe who were pitching for that